Alright guys, so we're going to talk about my first playthrough in Armored Core 6, what I think about it, and kind of my suggestions for through every boss, but I will make suggestions on what I think works the best. So for every weapon in the game, I didn't use bazooka, Gatling gun, Gatling cannon user in Armored Core for I don't even know how long, heavy biped mechs that are very balanced all around and energy efficient with as much firepower as I can hold has been my style in all the games, which makes things a little bit rough. When you first play through, every single Armored Core game, when you first play through, you never really have what you seem to need to get things done. So, my first playthrough, just to kind of show you, I guess, I gotta get my stuff here. If you look, we've seen that we did all these missions here. We didn't do S ranks or anything else, but we did get all the way down to the end and did the first playthrough. Alright? Now, the mech that we have right now is what we're planning on using for the second playthrough. This is Dragon Claw. It's going to be kind of a medium and heavyweight mixture mech. The first reverse joint mech that I've ever really used in a game, because I've never really planned on using these mechs. But you see that we're keeping the Gatling gun, and we're going for a melee build with a Gatling gun support weapon, basically. And then we have an optional shoulder slot. And what I will tell you, no matter what your mech is in general in this game, it seems that Armored Core 6 has a very big emphasis on stagger. So it's very good to be able to kind of have some options for stagger on your build. I don't really care what it is, what you want to use, but you need something with some stagger. It's going to help you a lot with your fights, and I figured that out basically just playing over the time. The other thing is what I call the white glint method when it comes to making a build. So I personally like everything to be symmetrical in general. So like I like my double Gatling guns, my double missiles and things. White glint, if you played like the older games in Armored Core 4, is White glint had a long range, decent damage weapon in its right hand, and then like a shorter range, more DPS, still decent damage weapon in its left hand, and then it had basically split missiles on its shoulders for the most part. And split missiles in this game, if you never really used them, I never used them in the past because I never saw the point, but they're a tactician's tool. So basically they allow you to shoot a missile at max range without like locking onto a target, and then letting them split and find the missile targets for themselves. So if you don't have long range capabilities, or you don't want to get in range of someone else, you can shoot those off at a distance and they target them for you. And I think that's the biggest thing with White Glint, and I plan on making a White Glint build as well at some point. But Dragon Claw is going to be my next playthrough at Playthrough Plus, basically. And we'll be using melee weapons with Gatling gun and an optional backslide item for the most part. Right now we're using double split missiles. And then the original mech that I went through the game with is Project Dragonlord. So this guy has been an evolution. This is the end mech. So if you want something that's capable of beating the end game bosses and stuff, this is what I used and I suggest. And I can give a couple suggestions for the end bosses as well. So as you can see, his AP is 13,670. His defenses are very balanced all in all. Stability is pretty good. The recovery, you know, it's tracking's boost speed and stuff, the energy capacity, all this stuff is pretty good. We got like basically the max load and max energy capacity you can have on this this thing here. And what you use with this mech is at the end game you have to rely on your assault boost. So that's all this mech is he's a super heavy, balanced, well-rounded mech with double Gatling guns, the storyline energy laser, or an optional other back item in case. Like against mechs or single targets, I'm using the energy laser because it seemed to work very well against story components. Against anything else, you can go missiles or whatever else, and then the double Gatling guns. And then a late addition that I started using towards the end of the game was actually the shotgun. But now I'm thinking on it, I would suggest using this shotgun at the beginning of the game as well. So the stagger on it is just really, really nice. And there's mech fights where basically you need to weave in your shotgun gun gets overheated. You can swap to this left-hand one, and usually you can get a full barrage of both of them before needing to swap back to the shotgun later. And then as well as that, you can shoot both Gatling guns while you're preparing to shoot this back cannon. Then when the back cannon shoots, it'll interrupt your attacks for a second, and then you can go straight back into it. Now, I'll show you the parts that I use. This is the in-game mech, but essentially we use the Gatling cannons, and then we use the basically like the 10 launch missiles and stuff. 10 launch missiles, homing missile, and the plasma missiles were basically what we used early. The plasma missiles are probably what I would recommend if you can use vertical height. The 10-shot missiles is what I used if I had direct targets in front of me. And then once I unlocked the this laser cannon in the storyline, I just started using that, and then I'll swap back to the missiles if I need it afterwards. Okay. So nothing too serious there. These are all the components. So we got the minigun, we have the Zimmerman shotgun, the stun needle launcher, and then we have the, this is the second minigun. For the head, we have, which you'll unlock, the core, this V40A, which you'll unlock. It feels pretty weak when you fight them. Like, I ran that dude over, but I used this part in the end. Then we have the Tao Lao shoulders. Very solid looking shoulders. I was very split on these legs. I didn't like the look of these legs, honestly, but it's the only way to really do this. So the V2, as you can see, the other ones that we were using were overburdened, so we went back to these. You are extremely slow with your normal boosters, so that's why you have to rely on your assault armor. You can dodge rounds without using your assault armor, or your assault boost, but you only really get one dodge, and it can lead you into some situations. The only other thing I can really say about this is we ended up using these G2 PO4 boosters because it gives us basically it's giving us assault boost energy consumption. So if you want to go faster, you can. You know, it increases your speed a little bit, but I didn't want to increase the energy consumption. So we use the assault boost, the energy consumption as best as we can get it, and then the mid-range sort of lock-on is what worked best for us. So we're fighting mid-range, and then we're forcing ourselves into close range, which I think this works very well. It also allows you to assault boost circles around your target and hit them with the Gatling guns as well. But we were using a long time, but it just wasn't working for us at the end game. And then for the generator, the Stantai heavyweight ACs features outstanding energy capacity. As you can see, we have the highest energy capacity out of everything. We sacrifice some energy recovery, but that's fine because we need the extra energy to stay on our target or get to our target. That's fine. This mech is also actually fairly capable for air combat, so you can actually maintain your elevation in the air for a decent amount of time, and that's kind of key when it comes to some of these fights. So you'll find that there's mechs with, like, boss fight mechs that you have to fight that have shields that kind of have issues, but basically if you can fly in the air, you can dodge. A lot of the melee combat, if you have like really heavy melee combat people, you can fly up into the air, you can get over the top of them, and then their melee attack animations aren't so good at hitting targets above them. As you'll see, some of the melee weapons in the game, they have these like dodgeable right and left attacks. Some of them are not dodgeable right and left, but they are dodgeable in the air. So that's something to look forward to when you're looking at these melee attacks, is just see what kind of directions they're coming from and if they are dodgeable at all. That's kind of something to kind of take in consideration. And then we have the assault armor, which we equipped in-game, but we only really got the assault armor benefit out of one boss fight, and that was the first time fighting a coral mech. So the first time that you fight a coral mech, you'll notice that you're in a big area surrounded by water. The assault armor was pretty nice to be able to get additional stuns off on him potentially, but other than that, it wasn't that big of a deal. And I used the pulse armor for a long time, and then I used the pulse protection bubble for a while as well as the terminal armor. So starting the game, the terminal armor was actually very nice for these 1v1 matches that were really close. So I started with terminal armor, and then I ended up going towards the bubble protection armor stuff in general afterwards, because they give you higher damage negation and such. But I'll kind of go over what I think over some of these assault armors and all of that. So you can see assault armor maxed out. We'll go ahead and look at the OS tuning. So what I would recommend is by the time you get to end game, do go back in here and reset your OS tuning and kind of min-max your settings here. So we got the boost kick, the weapon base, so we can have shoulder weapons on the back. This you know, you don't need this on certain mechs. Like our mech right now, we don't necessarily need this weapon bay, but we don't have weight control, don't use manual aiming. We do have quick turn, although I realize that I'm not using it at all, basically. It does automatically activate sometimes if you're using a shield or some other weapon, but in general, it's not that big of a deal. I didn't end up using it very much. It is like 1 point, which means right now we should technically have like 2 points left. But I'm thinking on the controller, because I decided to use a controller instead of my mouse and keyboard, because it felt like blasphemy to use mouse and keyboard even though it's the first computer release. Then we have, you basically have to hit tab. I'm fairly sure it's this right button on here, but I never use this because it would make me have to take my hand off. So I just don't know about quick turn. I don't think it's necessary. I would say quick turn's probably, I don't know, is that like, I mean, I don't think tank treads would need it. Maybe like bipeds or something could use it. Then we went all into assault armor for in-game because I wanted to try and stun people. But if you don't have assault armor, here's what I will say. So pulse armor is very good if you activate this and you're going to use it to negate damage or tank damage while you're rushing an enemy with your assault boost. But you only get 2 uses with this, which is pretty much the downside of this. But it is very good for rushing your opponent and getting in their face. But assault armor is also good for that, and you get 3 uses instead of 2, so that's debatable. This right here, I mean, you're getting like an additional 6,000 AP potentially. The terminal armor is very good, but I think this is better for, I mean, it's good for Gatling guns early game, because if you have heals, you can kind of like just go all in and Gatling gun somebody down and just wait for this to pop. As far as I know, you can't activate it more than once, though. That's something that I wanted to test, but I never got to, because it says it automatically triggers a pulse barrier when the AC's AP reaches its limit, and then it enhances defense until barrier durability. But this one lasts 2 seconds. As far as I know, if you go to 0 and then you heal, you don't get a second one. If you did, I think that would be awesome, and I would probably use this a lot. But it kind of fell off late game. It's not too much. It's just like, it's basically a save if somebody can hit you for like instant kill damage. Good for some missions where the lasers can one-shot you, I guess. Those big boss fights, arms forts. The pulse armor, again, I think this is good for mechs that want to get in close and personal to enemies. Kind of rushing them. I think that's probably the best way to put this. If you're highly mobile, I think this is the thing. But if you're in a fight and you use like a very lightweight mech, or you're able to hold your ground like a tank or something, good. It has way more shield power than the pulse armor, and it lasts like 10 or 20 seconds. Like, it lasts way longer than the pulse armor, but it doesn't move. But if your mech is very fast, you can dodge around this and use it for cover, which I think is very good. And then if your mech has enough firepower, like say you're using bazookas or whatever, you can just set inside this bubble and protect yourself for a good period of time, which I think is very good. But for this mech here, I'm still recommending we went kinetic weapons, firing control. We went all into this. We didn't do any in explosive or energy melee. We went full into direct hit modifiers, and then we did dynamic control tuning. So we got this all the way up, but we don't have enough chips to get the additional 3% at the end. And then we did repair kit optimizations, so we're able to get this to 2,000 to give us increase. So you get 3 uses, additional 6,000 here on your bot, and then if you use pulse armor or anything like that, that'd be an additional 6,000. So basically, you would double your health total just with shieldage and repair kits here. And then if you use the bubble protection, then you would get, you know, almost 20,000 additional health there probably. So that's very good. But it also doesn't block melee attacks, as far as I know. So it's weak versus melee attacks. Good thing to note. But I think it's pretty interesting to look at these. If I was going to change anything here, like, I would be tempted maybe to decrease the other melee, but I don't know about 3%. 3% damage compared to 500 AP. I don't really know what would be the best call there, because if they hit you for 100 damage, it's 3 damage. Over duration of a fight, probably. I would say if you're going PvP and you don't have repair kits, I would just stick the extra points into the deflection control, and then probably more damage. Alright. Now, when it comes to starting mechs here, the first parts that we ended up getting, basically we already had the Melander head, so we used the Melander head. Then we just went heavy. Basically, I used the Melander part for a long time, but basically you just want the heavy components. These heavy components are able to hold your Gatling guns and everything else that you want early game, but you're probably gonna have to get rid of the cannon here. So you can go with the shock missiles, you can go with the homing missiles, just whatever that you can kind of slot in on here. If you want an optional back weapon, that's going to be the best bet early game. Basically, you can ride this all the way up to in game. Hit in game, so you can purchase. You're going to be able to go in and just, you'll get the laser cannon from the storyline. You will get this from the storyline. You will get this from a mech that you'll beat towards the end game. Keep the arms, and then you'll get this from the same mech that you beat in game. So the chest and the legs you get from the same mech. You fight that mech before you go and start fighting the Coral bosses, so they have higher energy negation, basically. So a lot of the people that you'll fight through the game have ballistic weapons, which makes this starting armor really strong. But then once you get towards the end game, they start using more energy weapons, so you need to increase your energy defense. And these two armor pieces balance you out between energy and ballistic. But if you wanted to spec purely for those bosses in game, you'd probably just go for energy defense as best you can, and that would help you out. And so I would also say that the mech that these legs and chests come from, if you just use that mech in general, it would probably be the best bet fighting those in-game bosses, because it has the maximum amount of energy defense for the most part. But this one, very well-rounded, balanced. I didn't really feel like farming out any of the other stuff. Now, I don't know if I'm going to post videos about it, but I will talk a little bit about some of the boss fights here. So, if you don't want spoilers, just stop the video. I'm not going to give too many details away. I will give vague ideas on what bosses I'm talking about. Probably the spider is going to be the one that y'all realize the most. But basically, all of these bosses, when you're fighting them, you can last in the air. Those have big advantages. For pretty much every single boss in the game, the stun break is massive, as well as your total DPS or burst damage. So all of that stuff is very important. And then you have basically things like the spider mech, which you probably have seen. Essentially, you need to pay attention to when bullets and things ricochet off of targets, because you'll notice there's either an effective range that you need to be in, or there is a another way to defeat the boss. If it's taking very minimal damage, there's probably another method that you have to use to beat the boss. The spider mech in general, if you know what I'm talking about, essentially it's an outer shell that's very, very armored. And so if you're running away from it, it will chase you and it will do a ton of damage. It's very difficult to avoid, and it'll take a long time to kill. So if you push your mech into it and you do enough burst damage, it'll actually try to run away from you, and you'll take basically no damage fighting it at all. And they all have every phase where they go airborne. Then you can go above it or below it. You basically just want to stay away from its lasers for the most part. Use your shields and stuff in defense. There's a boss fight that has a big shax. Flying in the air was basically the best way to deal with that. It made his melee attacks miss, and it allowed you to get around his shield a bit, but you also need stagger damage for sure. I will say that the shields I wasn't super impressed with in this game so far. Hopefully they allow us to get a metal shield eventually. But they are good at blocking. Basically, the electric shields are good for blocking stun damage and like bullets at ineffective ranges, like Gatling guns at long ranges and things that electric shield can block. So a lightweight mech with an electric shield or something along those lines could be very good. The other thing I would suggest is, when it comes to probably, let me think about the hardest fights. Probably the hardest fight in the game that I found was the first kind of Rubiconian fight, or whatever you want to call it, in the big lake. You'll notice, because it has like a bunch of red energy, all of that good stuff. That's probably the hardest fight that I saw in the game, even harder than the in-game fight. And with this build, what I can tell you is this is the exact build that I used to beat it. The exact mech that I used to beat it. And this is what I'm going to tell you. If you copy this build, you will die a few times. Don't get me wrong, you're not going to steamroll that boss, but you can steamroll the boss if you kind of listen to what I'm saying for a second. So basically, when you start the fight, the boss will be flying in the air and charging up an attack. You want to dodge, move forward, whatever, and then it'll immediately go into a right side melee attack. At that point, you can dodge right underneath the melee attack and then left trigger shotgun blast the mech. Then you immediately assault boost into its face, kick it in the face, left trigger shotgun attack while right triggering the Gatling gun. It'll trigger a stun, and then you'll left bumper second Gatling gun, right bumper cannon, and you'll get a huge amount of damage off at the very beginning of the fight. Like 25%, 50% of its health will be gone. And then after that, that's basically what you have to do to beat the boss. Is if you use the assault armor or you use the defensive armor, you could even use the 1 or 2. I don't think it matters necessarily. I specifically took the assault armor to fight that boss for an emergency stun break, but I ended up beating the boss without... I hit 1, but I don't know if it was effective or not. So basically, that's the combination of effects that you need to beat that boss. You need to maintain the stagger effect on it. And then when you stagger it, you swap to your secondary Gatling gun, or if it gets really low or if it gets really high in stagger and you need to get it right over the edge, you swap to the second Gatling gun and you get it over the edge. You'll notice there's a few pauses in the fight. That's where you can hit it with the stun cannon, which builds up its stun effect at long range, so you can hit that and it'll help you trigger the effect more often. So there's a few times that you can use that. Don't be afraid to tank some of its attacks, but not like the super powerful ones unless you're going to trade with a stun break or something. And then the second phase of the fight is basically, with this mech, you can use its assault boost and constantly avoid the mech's attacks for the most part. And you can stay in combat with it for a really good amount of time before you have to stop. So you can potentially run over that mech in the first phase of the fight with this one. If you kick, shotgun, apply pressure, and stun break combo it, you'll finish it off pretty quick. Basically without even losing half your health if you dodge most of the stuff. So that part won't be too bad. The second part of the fight on that one in particular, what I'll tell you is, I'm not exactly sure what's going on with it, but basically it comes back and it doesn't seem to be taking any damage at all. So there's either two options that I could kind of suggest here. One, you either listen to the crazy energy chick that's talking to your brain and wait for her to say the word generator. When she says generator, it was taking damage perfectly fine. The other thing that I've tried, basically how I beat it at the end, was I waited for it to spawn. I hit it with a double Gatling gun, cannon combo, and an assault armor at close range. And I don't know if it did anything or not, but it was able to stagger. It seemed quicker. The rotation for its attacks there, everything that it does seems to be on a very simple rotation for attacks. There's a couple of variations that it does. But if you manage the first area, the other thing I'll say about that, when it comes to the second phase of that fight, you don't want to just stagger it. You don't want to just immediately stagger it. What you want to do is, you can use the assault armor, shotgun, combo at the very beginning. And then as soon as it goes into like its first kind of powerful attack, then you stun it, because you interrupt its attack chain and you stun lock it and do a bunch of damage. So you avoid the massive amount of damage it's going to do to you, and you stun lock it and trade damage with it. That's probably the best alteration that I can suggest when you fight that boss. And then the final boss, if you're going to fight, well, it depends on what story ending you go. So I'm not going to give any spoilers with that. The final boss is easier than the other boss that I just talked to you about, so it shouldn't be that bad. And this mech in particular can run those over for the most part. Basically, you need to be very aggressive, you need to apply pressure, and you need to time your cannon shots and your kicks to do a maximum amount of stun damage. And hopefully you give this build a try. This is Project Dragonlord. It is going to be my first playthrough. My overall thoughts of the game so far is that it's actually easier than the other Armored Cores, it seems, but we haven't went through the other alterations of the story yet. So for now, it seems easier. I mean, the first playthrough and everything seemed easier to me than the other Armored Core games. The boss fights, most of them really easy. The missions are fairly short compared to the other Armored Core games. They don't really seem to drag on as long, but you have the potential to find and get all those extra parts. I did notice there are bosses around the map that you can run into. Particularly, there's a bridge with a bunch of these like spinning discs that were like destroying me when I was going towards that one boss fight I was telling you about. Those discs were probably more dangerous than the actual boss was, and there's like 16 of them down there, something nuts. But I think the tactics in the game, like there's a lot more tactical use that you can do in the game. You can avoid combat and stuff. It feels a lot more fluid. They put a lot of effort into the cinematics in the game, I feel like. So cinematically, I think the game is a lot better than it was, but I don't think it necessarily added a huge effect to the game to me. To like, I mean, I'm still happy they kind of did it, but I don't think it would have been a breaking point for me personally if the cinematics weren't that amazing. The worm fight was probably the best all-around cinematic performance that I've seen in any game for a while. Like, the worm fight, it felt like you were inside of an anime. Like, it was legitimately probably one of the best fight scene things. Like, it was a simple fight, but probably one of the best, like, feeling cinematic kind of voiceover fights that I've ever seen in the game, especially Armored Core. So, oh, God. The customization and stuff, I haven't went through all of it yet, but it doesn't seem like there's as many parts as there used to be. I'm not sure. Maybe I didn't buy or find enough parts or kill enough special mechs to unlock all the parts yet. But my first playthrough, I literally, I mean, and then everything else is just kind of, you know, I could see playing, I would play with the starter mech, I think would be really cool, basically, so far. But Project Dragonclaw is going to be this one is going to be very interesting because I never play reverse leg mechs, and this is the first time I've actually seen one that looks decent to me. Like, it's decently solid looking. It fits the theme that I'm going for, because basically Dragonlord is the big supreme mega mech, and then this one, the Dragonclaw, is going to be more focused on melee combat, but still keeping the general theme of the Dragonlord mech. And then we're going to make Dragon Fang, which is going to be more of a long-range kind of snipery mech with maybe one melee weapon. But overall, I think Armored Core is still doing very good. I do better than I thought they did starting out the game. Like the collisions, the kicks, all that stuff is very nice. I think if they were ever going to improve anything else in the game, I mean, the cinematics are really nice, don't get me wrong. Like, I enjoy the cinematics in this game. Everything's really nice with it. But I would say that map tactics would be better if there was, like, environmental things that you could take advantage of in the maps, or environmental things that you have to be aware of during a fight. I think that would be the best option for them in the game for the most part. And then if we're going to have this heal system and this easier way to play the matches and just get ammo restores and health restores and extra healing and all of this, add some twists to the game a little bit, like limb loss, bleeding effects on the mech. You know, that way, like, it'd be more interesting. Like, you go in, you get hit in a critical area, and you're bleeding out, well, you can use the repair kit now and kind of patch the wound, or you can just let the health like drain until you can maximize your healing kit. I think that would give you a more tactical thing. And then once you're out of kits, you would basically have a drain effect on you until you lost or won the fight. On top of that, though, I would say that terminal armor would then be more interesting to use, because you could say have terminal armor, say when it activates, it stops the bleeding effect on your mech. So you could basically use it as a extra healing effect. I think that would be very cool. So say you have 3 charges to heal, 3 charges that can remove the bleeding effect, or you could trigger your terminal armor and maybe get a little health boost and the bleeding effect decreases. I'm not sure, but overall I think a very good game. I enjoyed every minute with the first playthrough, and we're going to be going into the second playthrough very shortly here. And hopefully y'all guys watch. I don't know how I'm going to do with these kind of medium mechs. I mean, the AP here is actually only 3,000 less than what I had on the other mech, but my defenses are probably about 200 less. So we'll have to see. We're also still very heavy. So it's still basically a heavy to medium tier mech for me. But generally, I go as bulky as I can go in these games. Now, if you have any questions about how to beat a certain boss or something on your first playthrough, I can give you suggestions when it comes to the heavy mechs coming through. So y'all make sure, if y'all have any questions or whatever, just send me like a chat. Twitch is probably the easiest way. If you just show me on Twitch and I can see it. Because I don't really check my YouTube as much and all that, so y'all guys have a great night.